By the late 1960s, Ford pretty much owned the UK car market. The small car to own was a Mk1 Escort, and if you were a family that wanted a small saloon car, you bought a Cortina. The Mk1 was a runaway success, and the Mk2 Cortina went on to be Britain's best-selling car. So you might imagine then that when it came time to replace the Mk2 Cortina, Ford would stick to the tried and tested formula of gently refining and revising the car without straying too far away from that popular original product. But no. What would go on to be the Mk3 Cortina would be a radical departure from the norm. Up until now, the European equivalent of the Cortina had been the Taurus, a comparable mid-size saloon car but catered more to European tastes. Well, to streamline production processes and of course to save costs, the Mk3 Cortina would be platform sharing for the first time with the European Taurus. So the full model name for the Mk3 is actually the TC Cortina, where TC of course stands for Taurus Cortina. Much like the Anglia 105e had taken pretty much all its styling traits from Americana, so too did the Mk3 Cortina. You'll notice that classic Coke bottle side profile, that gorgeous hip kink in the rear doors, and take particular note of the fins in the front wings, that big front grille, and that lovely bulge in the middle of the bonnet. All of those were designed to ape the American Mercury Montego. And no, that's not to be confused with the Austin Montego. And it wasn't just inspired stylistically by Americana. The Mk3 Cortina was also designed to look and feel bigger. So it might be the same length as the Mk2, but it's a full 4 inches wider, which not only gives you a more spacious, roomier cabin, but it makes the car look bigger and more imposing on the road. Tie that together with a longer wheelbase to again give more cabin room, and you've got a Cortina that, to all intents and purposes, is no bigger than the car it replaces, but it manages to look and feel an awful lot bigger.
And Ford was so keen to sell the new Cortina on feeling bigger without really being any bigger that the Mk3 replaced not only the Mk2 Cortina but also the larger and more expensive Corsair. To do that, Ford had to offer more engines and more trim levels, so they did. You could get your Mk3 Cortina with a 1.3 or 1.6 litre crossflow or a 1.6 or 2 litre variant of the Pinto.
And whilst that top of the line 2000 was the one that every UK Cortina buyer was striving for, abroad there were some forbidden fruits that were altogether a lot more exciting. In South Africa, for example, you could get your Mk3 Cortina with a V6, a 2 litre, a 2.5, or the full fat 3 litre model.
But even that pales into insignificance compared to the Australian market Cortina Big 6. Built locally by Ford of Australia, the top spec model could be had with a 4.1 litre straight 6 from the domestic Ford Falcon. That turned this humble family saloon car into a bona fide muscle car.
But fear not, UK Cortina buyers, you might not be able to get the big 6 cylinders offered abroad, but there are plenty of trim levels to choose from. Right the way from the base or the L like we've got here with one door mirror and nothing in the way of equipment, all the way up to the Mac Daddy, the GXL. If you got one of those, you've got a chrome radiator grille with quad headlights, you've got a vinyl roof, you've got chrome wheel arches, you've got 4 auxiliary dials, lashings of fake wood panelling, and a rev counter. But whether you got a Povo spec 1.3L or the top of the line 2000 GXL, your Mk3 Cortina was coming with new suspension. The McPherson struts from the Mk2 were replaced with a more traditional double wishbone front end setup, which, whilst not quite as sharp as the outgoing model, were designed to be more comfortable, to be more forgiving, at the expense of a bit of that handling sharpness. So the Mk3 Cortina is famously a bit of a rolly boat, and to be honest with you, cling on in the tight corners because it is not a planted sports saloon. But that said, it's meant to be comfortable family transport, and indeed it is a genuinely relaxing and really comfortable car to drive. You've got these lovely soft squishy seats, and the suspension, which whilst not the tightest or the most taut, it's got a fantastic ride, and it is genuinely really refined, which was another focus for the Mk3 as well. Ford were determined that the Cortina be an easier car to use long distance now that more and more people were venturing out onto motorways with them. There's thicker steel to make it more refined, there's a lot more sound deadening to quieten it down at speed, and the longer wheelbase means it rides better as well. this is a much more capable long-distance tourer than the outgoing Mk2 Cortina. And I should know, I've driven this one nearly 1,000 miles. I drove it 400 miles a day last week, and I genuinely felt fresh when I got out of the thing. There's not many 50-year-old cars you could drive 400 miles in a day and not at least have a little bit of a headache. This one I'm driving here has got the 1600 crossflow engine, which is the second from smallest, least powerful engine you could get in a Mk3. But it has to be said, it really does go well. It sits at 70 miles an hour on a motorway with no complaints. It does 30 odd miles to the gallon, which is deeply impressive for a 50-year-old car on carburettors. This one is fresh as a daisy, revs out lovely. Yeah, I like this. So Ford had attempted to reinvent the wheel with the Mk3 Cortina. They changed the styling to Ape Americana, they'd offered more trim levels, more engines, and they'd attempted to make all models into more refined, more comfortable long-distance cruisers. But had it worked? Had they managed to retain that market in the UK and stay right at the top of the sales charts? Not initially, no. A factory strike in early 1971 put production levels back an estimated 100,000 Cortina units. That put a massive dent in Ford's sales, and very briefly, Vauxhall and Morris overtook them to top the charts. But by 1972, the Cortina hadn't just come back fighting, it was back at the top. It was the best-selling car in Britain from 72 right the way to 76, and it was only then superseded by the Mk2 Escort. All in all, over a 6-year lifespan, Ford sold 1.1 million Mk3 Cortinas. For me, the Mk3 Cortina is one of Ford's very best efforts. It's proof that when they put their all into a project, develop it from the ground up, and leave nothing on the table in terms of their efforts, they really can make something special. It could well be the best variant of Cortina as well, when you consider that the Mk4 and Mk5 that came after this were really just heavily reskinned Mk3s anyway. Have a look at a Mk3 Cortina. It could well be the last of the 70s Fords that hasn't yet gone stupid price-wise. It's one of Ford's very best efforts, looks gorgeous, it's still usable today, and compared to other classic Fords, it's something of a bargain as well. Sounds like a winner.